This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Morning to you, 3 minutes after 8 on Monday, June the 10th. Consider it continuing then the LBC series in which you have the opportunities to put your calls and questions to those who would lead the Conservative Party and obviously therefore be the Prime Minister. Remember last week you spoke with, among others, Rory Stewart, Esther McVeigh, Andrea Leadsom. Today it is the turn of the Home Secretary and Conservative MP, obviously, for Bromsgrove in this occasion. Sajid Javid, who's in the studio with me. Welcome, Home Secretary.
Good
Thank
morning,
you.
Nick.
Good to
Thanks
see
for
you again,
having
sir.
me on.
Thank you for coming along. Is it fair to say, as some of the newspapers are characterising it, that your campaign hasn't really hasn't off to the powerful start that you might have hoped for? How fair is that?
Well, I'm very happy with how my campaign is going so far. I've been picking up support all the time, including this weekend with Ruth Davidson.
How significant is Ruth? Just to remind, of course, that's the leader of the Conservatives.
I think it's hugely significant. I mean, she's a real election winner. I think every one of your listeners would have heard of her. She's known not just in Scotland, but she's a national asset to the Conservatives, and I think it's significant. And like Ruth, I'd say I'm a bit of an outsider. When Ruth was first selected to be the Scottish Conservative Party leader, she was a bit of an outsider, but I think that's what we needed in Scotland at that time to shake up the political system there. And I think that's what we need here as well, to get people to take another fresh look at the Conservatives. We need to change.
But Mr Javid, you're an outsider. You attended one of the best universities in the country and you were managing director of Deutsche Bank. How does that make you an outsider?
Well, Nick, look at me. Do I look like a Conservative candidate from Central Casting? Look at me. Think you know a bit about my background. We've talked about it before.
We have.
It is very different. You find me any Conservative Prime Minister that has a similar background to me, or any Prime Minister for that matter.
The fact that you have a darker skin makes you the candidate, then, does it?
No, not at all. But I think, here's what it does: is that I think as a Conservative Party that wants to stay in office, the truth is we are far behind at the moment. We look incompetent. We feel like we haven't delivered on our central promise, which we haven't, which was to leave the EU by March. We've been in power for 9 years now, one way or the other. So we need to change things. We need to shake them up. And I think if you have someone that is different, that looks and feels more like modern Britain, I think you get a fairer hearing from the public. I think they will take more attention about what we have to say. Of course, you need to have the right policies, the policies that are going to take this country forward, which I believe I have. But you do need to shake this up. So
in the event that you're not successful, obviously you'll be supporting Sanjima.
Well, no, if I'm not...
You must be. That's the logical conclusion.
No.
He's the other outsider in the sense that you're exploring, which is
because
skin colour.
it was what I've just said is that you need to win.
No, but I can take it that should you not succeed, you'll support Sam.
You need a number of factors to win. Right. A number of factors. And I think one of those is to shake things up by having someone, as I call, a bit of an outsider. But you also obviously need experience. You need the ideas, the vision. And I think because of my background, because of my experience, because of my vision for the country, I can help unite it and take it forward and deliver on Brexit.
And just lastly, before we go to the calls, and coming to you, Ravi, you will be the first caller. You say that the government looks incompetent. Should we be candid with each other, Home Secretary? It is incompetent, isn't it, as regards Brexit?
Well, with regard to Brexit, yes, we haven't delivered.
Yes.
We haven't delivered, absolutely.
So where is there any
we should have delivered by the end of March this year. It was our central promise at the last general election, and we have failed and we have not delivered. So the most important thing for an incoming Prime Minister is going to be how are they going to deliver on Brexit? Have they got a credible plan? Can they do it by the end of October this year?
All right. Well, I'll be asking you some questions of that in a moment. But if you'd like to put your headphones on, we can then make sure that you get through to our first call. Let me also pass you a piece of paper, should you desire to make any notes.
Thank you.
You have there, as I introduce the conversation, Ravi in Ruislip. Ravi, you're through to the Home Secretary. Go, Mr. Javid. Go ahead, Ravi. Good morning.
Hi, Home Secretary, and hi, Nick.
Hello, morning. Sir.
Hi.
Yes. Hi. There's so many issues, but one issue, as a father of teenage sons, I'm really, really deeply concerned about the rise in knife and violent crime. And you have promised that you'll put 20,000 officers on the beat if you became the PM. I'm just curious, where did you find this money from now, and what stopped you from doing so already, especially after such a record number of young people being murdered in the capital in the UK? That suddenly, if you became the Prime Minister, you would do it. Why wouldn't you do it before?
Why can't the money come as Home Secretary? Home Secretary.
Well, thank you, Ravi, and I absolutely share your concerns, and especially you mentioned your teenage sons, and I've also talked about my own teenage children and my concerns. So I absolutely understand that. But going directly to your question, you're saying, why haven't I done that before? So to be clear, I've said if I was Prime Minister, I would prioritise policing, and I would have an additional 20,000 officers nationally. Why haven't I done that so far is because I don't lead the government. I don't set the priorities for spending. My department doesn't have a way to fund it itself. It has to come from central funding. And so I am certain that that can be done if that becomes a priority, and it will be if I was Prime Minister. But may I also say, Ravi, as well as resources and more police, what we also need is needed to look fresh at the powers that police have. And what I have done is bring in about the offensive weapons. It was the bill, now it's an act of Parliament, and that gives a whole host of new powers to police. And also I gave police the confidence to start using stop and search again properly. And since I've done that, over just around a year ago, we've seen a fall in the murder rate in London and in stabbings, significant fall. I think the murder rate has fallen by 25%. So I will continue to do all I can. But my point is, if I'm Prime Minister, I can do even more.
Bring back Ravi in a moment. You say use stop and search properly, so they were using it improperly, Home Secretary?
No, by properly I mean give police confidence to use it. So what had happened...
So what wasn't working properly before that is now working, to use your word, properly?
Well, what had happened over the years is that police were being sort of told that you shouldn't really be using stop and search because you'll upset communities. And my
that was by your boss, by the Prime Minister, wasn't
it? I'm talking about what I've done, and what I've done. As I looked at that,
so
and
what she did was improper, obviously.
Well, it's I think the proper use of stop and search is to give the police more confidence to use it when they think it is appropriate. I mean, I trust police to use their powers.
Yes.
And what we've seen is that while police have been doing that, there's been more stop and search in London. It hasn't gone back, and there's no need for it to go back to what you might think as wholesale use.
Used was the then Home Secretary's stance, wasn't it? She dialed down stop and search.
Well, she had a view on stop and search. My view is different, and
I can say that's wrong, Mr. Javid.
I can say my view is different. My
you
view
can't
is
say Theresa May as Home Sec was wrong.
I think she had reasons for her view on stop and search. My view is that you have to give the police confidence to use. These were existing powers.
Why can't you just say it was wrong?
I'm saying.
But one is properly, so which impose I can say proper, so proper use. So the other one was obviously wrong.
I think the approach to stop and search until I made changes was the wrong approach.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
and now we have an approach that is making a real difference. But I will say this, we don't need to return to exactly what it was like back in 2010 when there's wholesale use. It's more intelligent, targeted use, and that's what we need to see.
Let's bring Ravi in. Ravi, a response. I don't know, have you heard enough about the cash side of this? Ravi, back to you, sir.
Hi there. I think a normal voter like myself, I'm a floating voter, I don't believe all that, because when you say I'll make it priority should be young people being murdered in the street for the last several years and crime going up. I mean, like I said, there's some of the issues like Brexit, etc., but this issue is very close to my heart. It's like to a lot of other people, especially Londoners, and I think the politicians are still using that diplomatic language and saying like, well, priority, I will look into this. So, Sajid, did you put this proposal already to Theresa May before that you want these 20,000 police officers, and she turned it down?
I've been asked, yes, since I've been Home Secretary, I've been asking for more funding for police. There has been some limited success in that I did manage to double the budget for policing this year, so compared to the previous year.
What is that figure, Home Secretary?
It's just under £1 billion for England and Wales. And that is leading to the hiring of around another 3,500 police officers and staff. So that's the biggest increase in police numbers since 2010. But as I say, I want to go further, and I have plans to do just that.
All right, and I have a figure here. It's £1 billion over 3 years you're looking for. That's a figure. Is that a figure you recognise?
For the extra 20,000 police officers?
Yes.
That's right. It's just under £1 billion for 3 years.
Over 3 years. OK, Ravi, thank you. Phil in Crowell in Lincolnshire. Go ahead, Phil. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick, and good morning, Home Secretary.
Hello, sir.
Good morning.
I was wondering what your thoughts on immigration is and what your policy on immigration is going to be, because when you think that after Brexit we need to be going it alone and looking at the UK as UK PLC, then you want to be recruiting people to make the company UK PLC good, profitable and strong. And I want to know what you would, how you would look at the immigration problems regarding people's ability to be a productive member of the UK PLC and not a liability on the UK. Would you be able to vet people, or would you believe in vetting people and bring them in so they can bring their skills and expertise with them?
Thank you, Phil. I'm a big fan of immigration. My parents were immigrants, and I've seen, growing up, the huge contribution to our country from immigrants from all over the world, not just economic, I think culturally and in so many ways. And what Brexit gives us is, for the first time in over 4 decades, the ability to have our own immigration policy and have control. And I've already set out what that could look like, post-Brexit. And that is a policy, I think, something, Phil, you'd like, given what you've just said, which is it's focused on skills, and it's open to anyone in the world. So it doesn't give you an advantage if you're from Europe. It doesn't matter if you're from India or the US or France. You're all treated the same based on your skills and what you can offer to the country. And my own views, I think what's very important, and certainly from speaking to so many people about this, is they want to know that the UK government can control immigration. They're less concerned about the overall absolute number. So I would not continue with the current policy of saying that you've got to have some crude target of net migration of tens of thousands. I think it should be based on what we actually need as a country.
Phil, quick response from you. Phil?
Yeah, yes, well, no, I'm quite pleased with what you've said.
Okay,
actually.
well, that's good. Then we move on, Phil. Thank you, because he's obviously secured your support. We move to Jerry in Liverpool. Jerry, your question. Go ahead.
Oh, hello. Thanks for taking my call.
No problem,
I'm a 79-year-old grandma, a staunch Remainer, and the idea of leaving the EU with no deal terrifies me. And I'll tell you why. I'll be very quick.
And then I must ask you to ask your question, if you would, Jerry, but go ahead.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. I think the most important situation is leaving without the deal, the Good Friday Agreement being broken. And I would like to know, this means that people might die. And does he believe that people voted to go back to the Troubles? And does he believe that he thinks this is a risk worth taking?
Let's ask you the Northern Ireland issue. I know you've given strong views on this, Home Secretary.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jerry, I'd say that it is absolutely my priority, and it has been the government's priority, to leave with a deal, because whilst no deal can't be taken off the table and you need to prepare for it, it could happen. The focus should absolutely be a deal, and you're quite right to raise one of the key issues, and it's a very important issue about why a deal is the preferred outcome, and that is peace on the island of Ireland. And as Home Secretary, someone who is responsible for overseeing security throughout the country, I'm acutely aware of the problems, both of the past and the tensions that still exist on the ground. And I don't think anyone wants to see anything happening that could bring some of the problems of the past back. We are absolutely, and I as Prime Minister would be absolutely committed 100% to the Good Friday Agreement, and I would not do anything that would change that border by putting any kind of infrastructure on it. So even if it was a no-deal outcome, and as I say, it's not something I want to see, but even if it was a no-deal outcome, I think at least from our side, we would have to absolutely 100% abide by that agreement and not change the status of that border.
So how will the border function? How would you see the border function, Home Secretary?
In a no-deal outcome.
Yes.
I think that, obviously, in that situation...
Or to breathe new life into it. You become Prime Minister and you go to Brussels, you say, right, one of the sticking points is, my solution for the border is...
Yes, and so in my department at the moment, we have Border Force, and Border Force are experts in borders, and they in fact give advice internationally on borders. And we have been looking at how that border could function with what's been called alternative arrangements, using existing technology to have, you still have checks, but they're all done away from the border, so the border remains an open border as it is now. And so it can be done. I've seen how it can be done. It can be put together in a couple of years, so during the sort of implementation period, as it were, of a deal. But what I would like to do
is it? Really, cameras? Is it smart cameras that are doing it?
No, it's not cameras. It would be, for example, that you'd have a trusted trader system. So firms that send goods across the border both ways, that they would have, if there are customs checks, it's done perhaps in their factories and not actually at the border. And what I would do, though, to try and sort of refocus on this is, and as I've said, is I would offer to pay the entire cost of this new border system, not just obviously for ourselves, but for the Irish. So I would say that whatever the setup costs are, and they could be in the hundreds of millions, and whatever the annual running costs are, we, the UK government, should pay that. Why should we do that? Because if it unlocks a deal as opposed to a no deal, I think it's worth the economic prize. And also, I think, going back to Jerry's point, I think it's morally right that we offer to pay for it, because we are committed to the Good Friday Agreement just as Ireland is. And therefore, I think, given that we are changing the status quo, we should offer to pay for the outcome.
And what might that be for financially? How much?
It's hard to estimate. No one's really done this before, but I would say that the setup costs.
You go into a negotiation and say, I'm prepared to pay for something, but I've no idea how it will cost.
I have some idea. I was going to say I don't have an exact number.
No, I mean just roughly.
I think setup costs would be up to £500 million,
right?
And annual running costs could be up to a couple $100 million for both sides,
right?
And so. That would,
and we'll pay it forever in perpetuity. The 200.
I think we should offer to pay forever. Yeah, I do. I think this is what we have made this decision. We signed that Good Friday Agreement, and it's by signing that agreement we said we will always keep that border open. I think it's morally right, but economically, if we get a deal, let's be clear, we're going to have a mini economic boom if we get a deal. And
you're confident of that?
Absolutely confident. We will get a mini economic boom if we get a deal, because already now. There are many businesses obviously unhappy with the uncertainty that's there. The investment that is frozen up will be
uncertainty, aren't they? Some of these businesses they're unable to make decisions.
Once that fog of uncertainty has lifted, there will be an increased investment both from home and abroad, and I'm absolutely certain of that. You remember my background before it was 20 years in finance and business, and I'm absolutely certain of that. And it will more than pay for the cost of this border. And if you compare that to potential cost of a no deal, it's a no-brainer.
All right. Well, I remind everybody you're a managing director at Deutsche Bank, which is one of the biggest global banking organisations in the world. Staying with money, Boris Johnson doesn't want to pay the £39 billion. Is he right, Home Secretary?
I think it's too simplistic to say that, because in one sense, obviously, if you haven't got a deal, then you're not obligated to pay that $39 billion there and then, because you haven't signed the withdrawal agreement. But even in a no-deal scenario, you're clearly going to want to have some sort of deal eventually. You're not going to stay in that situation forever. And so to get back to the table and agree even some different type of deal or set of deals, I'm sure you're going to have to come to some arrangement about what you might pay and how you might pay it. So I think the answer is you'll pay something, and we are a country that always meets our international obligations. I think that's a very important point. But how you pay it and the exact amount might become a bit more flexible.
Let's move to other questions. Angela's in St Albans. Angela, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning, Home Secretary.
Good morning.
I'm just calling to ask why my brother, who is a Windrush child, is still waiting since July 2018 for a decision on his independent leave to remain. And what difference would you make to those of the Windrush generation as Prime Minister?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, as you will know, one of the reasons I think I became Home Secretary was because of the Windrush scandal.
It was, yes.
And I think
that's why your predecessor stood down, of course.
Well, and I think that a lot has been done since then, but more still needs to be done to right the wrongs. And these were wrongs under successive governments. I've apologised on behalf of this government and successive previous governments. And on your particular case, I'm afraid, obviously, without knowing the details, I wouldn't know, but I'd be very happy to look at it some way getting
briefly,
details.
Tell us the story, if you would. Sorry to interrupt, I'm sorry. Yeah. Very briefly, if you would, Angela. Tell us some details about your brother.
Yes, we are 3 Windrush children. We came here in 1962. My brother, sadly, was here for some time and then had to return because of ill health. But he has been regularly to visit our parents.
But sorry, what is the decision I'm sorry to talk over you, Angela. It's a product of the fact we don't have a lot of time together. What is the decision that you're waiting from the Home Office for? Then?
Oh, we've sent in all the paperwork. We've done the biometrics. We've had to go back time and again with the proof that our parents are naturalised. That all of this we've done.
Okay, well,
and we still can't hear anything. And we're working with our MP, and there's still no response.
Well, what I'm going to suggest is, if you would talk to one of my colleagues, I'll pass this on to one of Mr. Javid's colleagues, who I'm sure it's a little. I'm very grateful, Angela, for the call. It's a little unfair, perhaps, to blindside the Home Secretary in this fashion for an individual case. But I could put it to you, Mr. Javid. Why are there still cases outstanding? Let's park Angela's brother to one side. Why? What's taking so long?
One of the first things we set up was a task force with tens of people working on that.
Tens?
And tens. And well over 100 people working on that. Eventually, it started in 2013, and we built up the number of people. And that task force has documented over 6,500 people that have contacted it for proper documentation. Over 4,000 people have been issued with UK citizenship, all free of charge.
But there are still cases. What I'm asking is, so that's great. But why are there still cases outstanding?
Well, there could be many reasons, and there shouldn't be that many. But it depends also when the case comes in as well, and some of them will be more complex than others. But the point is that whenever there is a case, it should be treated as a priority. There's a dedicated task force, as I say, and this particular case, whilst I don't know the details,
I know that's not fair.
We
need. But you would hope that this would all be resolved. All Windrush cases will be resolved very shortly.
There are still cases coming up. So every week there will be a new case, and people will contact us. So. Okay. I'd like to think that, but people still do contact us.
Angela, please give your details to one of my colleagues. We'll make sure it gets across to Home Secretary's Department. 8:24 to more calls. Richard in Oxford. Richard, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Mr. Javid.
Morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to ask you, since you declared a major incident in December, how many people have crossed the channel in small boats coming from France? Have you managed to establish where they started their journeys? And also, how many safe countries do they cross to get here?
Yeah, well, since we've had the major incident, and the reason, Richard, just to remind everyone, I declared as the major incident because back in December in particular, we saw a significant rise on those taking this treacherous journey. It's one of the most treacherous crossings of sea anywhere in the world. And I was very worried about the risk to life as well as protecting our borders. And that was the reason to do it, and particularly my concern around life. Thankfully, no one's been hurt in that process, and there hasn't been any loss of life that we know of. And of course, that's hugely reassuring. But you also asked me, since then, we've still seen significant numbers of people arrive.
What significant numbers?
We've seen, I think we've had over 200 in that period. I don't have the exact numbers, but I can tell you, for example, just over a weekend, 2 weekends ago, I think in one day, on a Saturday, we had overnight something like, I think, 74 with 8 boats. So there are still significant numbers of boats coming, and it's been up and down. I think the weather has had something to do with it, but also there's a number of criminal gangs involved. But what have we done about it is that the work that we've been doing with the French government, the Joint Action Plan, I think it is helping. We've increased aerial surveillance, working together on intelligence, and we have also significantly increased the number of returns back to Europe. Because, as you say, if you're coming from France, you are coming from a safe country, and under the current set of EU rules, if we're able to prove that, and the question is getting enough proof to satisfy the EU rules, then we can return, and we've returned over 30 people back to Europe, and that is about to significantly increase.
Just on a related question, it was on December 31st last year you announced that the 2 cutters, Protector and Seeker, would come from overseas. How long did it take to get them up here?
It took, I think off the top of my head, I think it took about 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
One was in Malta, wasn't it?
Well, one was in the... it wasn't exactly Malta, it was in the Med, and one was coming from Gibraltar.
Okay. Normally, how long would it take to get a cutter from Gibraltar?
No, it's not that. The issue was they were on duties in the Med, and they had commitments, and one was in for Gibraltar for maintenance,
right?
And so that does have to all be put right before they can be brought here, and that is why though. temporarily we had support from the Royal Navy, and they were able to cover until the cutters arrived.
Okay, but these cutters, what would be the voyage time from Gibraltar to the English Channel? Normally,
I would estimate about a week to 2 weeks.
You're probably doing about 4 days. So why would it take 6 weeks when it could have been done in 4 days?
Well, as I say, if it's in for maintenance, you have to wait for that to be completed.
So both were in for maintenance?
No, and the other one had activities that it's committed to in the Mediterranean because of the migrant issues and the flow of migrants from North Africa.
But if you were Prime Minister, would say, I'm going to get on this straight away. You'd be doing it quicker than 6 weeks, would you, if you're going to get onto an issue?
Well, I'd be led by what Border Force can tell me what's practically possible.
Well, why did you promise ships that you couldn't mobilise?
Because I promised ships as soon as I could bring them back, and also temporary cover in the meantime, which is exactly what I did.
All right. Let's go to, thank you. Other calls. Karen is in London Bridge. Karen, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Oh, hi. Hello, Mr. Javid. I'd like to ask, as a potential Prime Minister, would you carry on with the hostile environment and ask EU citizens to apply to stay in their homes? Because I've been in this country for 26 years.
Where are you from? Where are you from, Karen?
I'm French.
From France, okay.
Yes.
Stay on the line. Let's see what Sajid Javid has to say. This has caused, as you can understand, a lot of upset, Home Secretary.
I've been very clear on this, that as part of us leaving the EU, we need to make it absolutely crystal clear that all EU citizens that are in the UK, we estimate around 3.5 million, we want them all to stay, and we want to make it the process as easy and as simplistic as possible. And we want them to stay not just because of our own interest, but they are part of our families, they're part of our culture, and it's part of our future. And that's why we want them to stay. Now, in terms of the scheme, what's called the EU settlement scheme, the reason why something is necessary is because we don't know who's here from the EU. We don't know who these 3.5 million people are. Because of freedom of movement, they were quite literally, rightly, under laws, they turn up and put their passport in like a UK citizen through an e-gate and come and start working. So we don't know who they are. And so what we cannot have, a caller earlier mentioned Windrush, we cannot have another Windrush situation. This is exactly what went wrong. If you look back, what happened is at that time, think of EU citizens as Commonwealth citizens. They had, in effect, freedom of movement. That was shut down by the then government in the early 70s, but those individuals weren't found and documented, and because of that, many years later, they had a problem when they had to prove their right to work. So I will not tolerate another Windrush situation, and that is why we need to learn the lessons of the past and do this properly.
Karen, thank you. One last call. Dina in Maida Vale. Dina, you're through to Sajid Javid. Go ahead. Morning to you.
Oh, good morning to you both.
Hello. Good morning.
When you ordered Shamaya Begum to have her citizenship removed, did you recognise her as equal before the law as you are? And was it a populist move?
Well, Gina, thanks for the question. I mean, first of all, I can't talk about an individual case, but I'll talk about the issue because it's a well-known issue.
You can't talk because of the legal ongoings concerning Shamima Begum, is
yes,
that right?
Yes, it wouldn't be appropriate. Yes, it wouldn't be appropriate.
There's a challenge, I believe. There's a legal challenge to your position.
Yes,
yes. Right. Just so the listener understands.
Which is, and one of my most important jobs as Home Secretary is to do whatever I can to keep this country safe. And I have to deal with the law and the tools that I have. And if I'm given advice by intelligence officers, by counter-terrorism policing, by security officials in the Home Office, and by lawyers, then you'd be a pretty stupid Home Secretary not to follow the advice that you've been given when people could lose lives if you made a different decision.
That's pretty much where we have to leave that question, Dina, because of legalities. Two quick ones from me. You'll be aware, Home Secretary, it's 2 years on Friday since the Grenfell disaster. We understand that even at this time, 17 families remain in temporary accommodation. You were a Communities Secretary at the time. I appreciate it's now off your brief, but you must be concerned that there are still families in temporary accommodation 2 years on.
I mean, the Grenfell tragedy will always remain with me as one of the most sort of humbling and most difficult experiences I had in government. And when it comes to the families, of course, we should be doing everything that can be done to help those families. Again, I don't know, because I haven't been responsible for that for a year now, why there are 17 families in temporary accommodation, and there can be actually quite legitimate reasons that the families...
2 years?
It could be. I'm not saying there are, because I don't know the details. But I certainly know, for example, when I was looking at reaccommodating families, there were families that would rightly want to be given a number of options to move to permanent accommodation, and sometimes even when they moved in to the permanent accommodation, they would change their minds because maybe it's a bit too close to the tower and things like that, and then you take them back. So all I'm saying is that I don't want to pass judgment as to why they are still 17. There could be some quite sensible reasons that would... These aren't statistics. These are people, and they need to be treated like that.
Your brother is a senior police officer. What's the most shocking thing he's ever told you about the world of policing, that is? What's the most shocking thing? Not that he's stolen your pocket money. What's the most shocking thing he's ever told you about the world of policing?
Oh, well, the most shocking... what I've found is, having brothers being a police officer now for over 20 years, that there's always stories that he can share with the family. I'm not sure about what's the most shocking, but things I've certainly have found shocking, probably he didn't, is just how incredibly hard police officers work. And I remember when the number of Christmases he's missed and New Year's and things with the family because of that. And I do remember him once coming home and having his jaw broken. After being attacked, and thinking it wasn't much to worry about, when I was quite shocked that anyone working to protect the public would have to go through something like that.
Was it just?
But I remember just being shocked that he wasn't shocked.
He was. Was he trying to break up a fight of some sort? Or
something? I don't know how it happened, but in the course of duty.
And lastly, Mr. Gove, what's the greater crime, taking the drugs or the apparent hypocrisy?
Well, look, I'm not going to speak about my friends
you knew the
and
question was
fellow
coming
candidates.
your way.
And it's not right for me to talk about other individuals. They've got to make their own case. And but it is important that we continue the war on drugs.
Yes, but is it the hypocrisy that perhaps is the problem for Michael Gove?
I'm not getting into Michael. Right. He's a friend. He's a good man, and he's got every right to go forward in this race and make his case.
Home Secretary, good to see you here on LBC. Thank you. Sajid Javid, of course, one of the prominent Conservatives running to be the leader of the party. News on LBC is next.
Sajid Javid has told LBC he would scrap the target to reduce net migration to below 100,000 a year if he becomes Prime Minister. The current Home Secretary says the system should focus on skills rather than